The first thing Margot Hale noticed was that they had changed the lighting to make the bottle look like it was floating. She stood near the back of the gallery, an untouched glass warming in her hand, and watched a single spotlight pour down over a pedestal of black glass. On it sat the bottle. Her bottle, though no one in this room would ever call it that. The amber inside seemed to hang in the dark like something alive. It was a beautiful trick. She'd spent 11 years learning that the most beautiful things almost always were. A woman beside her leaned toward her companion, not bothering to lower her voice the way people don't when they've decided you're furniture. They really should have sat her in the back, the woman murmured, eyes flicking once over Margot. The soft width of her, the plain black dress, the flat shoes. Can you imagine? Someone that size representing a fragrance like this. It's supposed to be aspirational. Her companion laughed softly. God, no. They found the right face, thank heaven. Margot did not turn. She did not stiffen or flush. She'd learned long ago that the moment you let them see the hitland, you hand them the thing they came for. So instead, she lifted the little paper testing strip she'd dipped at the door out of habit, brought it under her nose, and breathed in. And there it was, bergamot on top, cool and bright. Beneath it, the heart she'd built petal by petal over a winter she'd rather not remember. All of it correct. All of it hers. She smiled. Just slightly. Not at the women who had already forgotten her. At the strip. Because she knew something the entire room did not. On the stage, Damien Croft, creative director of the Maison, lifted a microphone, and 200 people folded into silence. Beside him, under a second spotlight, stood the face. She was lovely. That had to be said, honestly. 26, perhaps. Sculpted the way money sculpts people. When Damien called her the extraordinary mind behind Liaison Noire, she pressed a hand to her chest as though the weight of her own genius had surprised her. The room applauded. Margot watched the young woman accept it. The smile, the credit, the 11 years. And she felt almost nothing. Not rage. Just a clean, cold clarity. The kind that arrives the instant you stop hoping a thing will be fair and start watching, very carefully, for the moment it breaks. Because a formula on paper is a recipe. Anyone with money can buy a recipe. But Margot had never given them the whole formula. Buried in the heart of Liaison Noire was a single deliberate flaw. One note that made no sense on paper. One choice a chemist copying her work would correct without thinking, because it looked like a mistake. And on the skin, hours from now, after everyone had gone home, that mistake would bloom into the thing that made the whole composition unforgettable. The girl on the stage could wear the bottle. She could say the words. She could not make it dry down right. Only the person who knew why the error was there could ever reproduce it. It was a small, private armor. The kind some women carry the way they carry a knife in their bag, not expecting to use it, simply preferring to have it. She set the strip down and turned to leave. And that was when she felt it. Not heard. Felt. The weight of being looked at. At the far end of the gallery, beyond the crowd and the floating bottle, a man stood alone. Older than the rest, 50 or near it, silver in his dark hair, a short exact beard. No glass in his hand. He wasn't watching the stage, or the girl, or the bottle. He was watching Margot, with the look of a man who'd walked into a room expecting one thing and found another. In his other hand, held low, was a testing strip of his own. As she watched, he lifted it. He breathed in. And then, clear across the room, he frowned. Not the frown of a man who didn't understand the fragrance. The frown of a man who understood it perfectly and had just realized the woman being celebrated on that stage could not possibly have made it. His eyes moved from the strip back to Margot. The corner of his mouth shifted. Not quite a smile. An acknowledgement. The way one professional nods to another across a crowded room. He knew. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know that men like him don't come to perfume launches, that the Maison's owners had gone pale when he walked in, that people said his name the way they say the name of weather that can level a house. She only knew that for the first time in 11 years, someone in this room had smelled her masterpiece and looked for the right person to credit. And he had found her in the back. To understand how a woman builds something the world hands to someone else, You have to go back 11 years. Margot had come to the Maison de Valois at 25, with chapped hands and a nose two of the best perfumers in Grasse had called, separately, the best they'd trained in a decade. She had no money, no name, no instinct for the politics of beautiful rooms. Only a gift. She could walk into a space and read it the way other people read faces. She thought, back then, that talent was a wall you could stand behind. She'd been there 4 years when they stopped putting her in the room. It happened gently, the way the important thefts always do. A new investor arrived, and with him a language she didn't speak. Brand identity. The face of the house. The photographs stopped including her, then the press releases, then the meetings. She was moved from the studio with the north light down to a windowless lab everyone called the cave. She told herself it was fine. The materials had never once cared what she looked like. That was where she'd made Liaison Noire. In the worst winter of her life, the winter her mother was dying 2 countries away with no money to go. She'd poured all of it into a single composition. The deliberate flaw at its heart was no marketing trick. It was the smell of an old soap her mother used to wear, discontinued before Margot was born, recreated from memory and hidden in the dry down where it read, on paper, as an error. She had buried her mother in that bottle and told no one. When the owners smelled the trial, they went quiet, then excited. Within a month, the contracts were redrawn so that Liaison Noire belonged, in every way the law recognized, to the house. She'd signed. Of course she'd signed. There was a clause that funded the cave and her 2 young assistants for 3 more years. She traded her name for their jobs without thinking it was even a choice. That was the thing the women at the launch would never understand. She hadn't been robbed in a dark alley. She'd handed it over in good light, with a pen, to keep 3 people employed. The cruelest thefts always come with a contract and a reason to be grateful. And there had always been someone there to remind her to be grateful. "They're talking about cuts again upstairs," Cecile would say, appearing in the cave with 2 coffees, the way she had every few months for 9 years. Cecile Aubray, who'd stood between Margot and the investors more times than she could count. "Keep your head down. Keep making beautiful things. Let me handle the people who don't understand what you are. I could just go up and talk to them myself," Margot had said once. "Oh, sweetheart, no." And Cecile had smiled, warm and certain. "The boardroom isn't a safe place for someone with your temperament. Let me protect you from all that. It's what I'm for." Margot had loved her for it, the uncomplicated way you love the one person who seems to be on your side. She had no reason yet to wonder why a protector would work so hard to keep the protected thing hidden. So when Damien Croft decided the fragrance needed a face and brought in a beautiful girl called Seraphine who knew nothing of how perfume was made, Margot had already learned not to fight the current. "The customer doesn't want to imagine your hands made it," Damien told her once, not unkindly. "They want to imagine they could be her." What Margot didn't yet understand, what she was only beginning to feel, watching a stranger frown at a strip, was that none of this had ever been about her face. Because 6 weeks before the launch, the real formula for Liaison Noire, not the registered file, but the working notes, the marginal scrawls where she thought out loud, the only documents that explained why it was built the way it was, had been quietly copied out of the Maison's secured archive and carried out the door. Someone had needed those notes badly enough to take them, and only 2 people besides Margot had ever understood that such notes existed. The teacher who'd trained her, years ago, and the woman who'd spent 9 years promising to protect her. She would not let herself think either name yet. To think a name was to start pulling a thread she wasn't sure she'd survive unraveling. She turned to find the exit. He was already walking toward her. The room rearranged itself around him as he passed. A waiter changing course, 2 executives going still by the bar. He stopped an arm's length away and held up the strip between 2 fingers, the way you'd show a card you already knew was a winner. "This," he said, his voice low and unhurried, "was not made by the woman on that stage." It was not a question. Margot said nothing. The opening is competent. Anyone can buy competent. But there's something underneath. A note that shouldn't work, holding the whole structure up. That's not competence. That's a signature. His eyes lifted to hers. "I make it my business to know whose signatures I'm looking at. and no one in this building seems able to tell me the truth about this one. A beat. So I thought I'd ask the only person here who isn't drinking." She looked at him a long moment, at the complete absence of the things she was used to in powerful men that need to be agreed with. And she made a decision that would cost her and save her in roughly equal measure. "You're standing too close to it," she said. "The alcohol's burned off. You're smelling your own skin now, not the perfume. Give it 3 hours, then smell it again, and you'll have your real question." She stepped past him toward the door and paused and did not look back. "And when you do, think very carefully about who you ask it to." He came to the cave 4 days later, and that, more than anything, told Margot the rules had changed. Nobody came to the cave. That was the point of it. So when the freight door sighed open at 9 and a single set of unhurried footsteps crossed the concrete toward her, she set down her pipette and turned. She was not surprised to find the silver-haired man from the gallery in the doorway of the only room in the building that had ever felt like hers. He looked around it. The racks of brown bottles, the blotters drying, the single chair, the absence of any window. With an expression it took her a moment to place, because she'd never seen anyone wear it down here. It was respect. "You were right," he said, no greeting. He held up a folded strip, the one from the launch, 4 days old now, fully developed. 3 hours. Then the next morning. Then last night. It keeps changing. There's something in the base that opens like a door, hours after everyone stopped paying attention. His eyes found hers. "It smells like a memory." I don't have a more precise word, and it's bothered me for 4 days that I don't. There was no more precise word. He'd found the exact one. She said nothing. The girl didn't make this. We've established that. But I don't care who takes the credit. It's the least interesting crime there is. He set the strip on her bench, carefully, the way you set down something that belongs to someone else. What I care about is that 6 weeks ago, the real working file for this fragrance turned up in the hands of a man I do business with, a man who's never made an honest thing in his life, and who suddenly, 3 months ago, decided to go into luxury fragrance. The floor seemed to tilt, very slightly, under her flat shoes. I came to smell what the fuss was about, and what I smelled was a thing no chemist on his payroll will ever reproduce, because it isn't chemistry. He nodded at the strip. Which means he didn't buy a perfume. He bought a person's notes and assumed the person was disposable. That assumption is usually where men like him make their first mistake. She looked at the strip. 4 days old. Her mother's soap, blooming in a windowless room for an audience of one. A stranger who'd carried it around half a week trying to find a word for grief. "You haven't told me your name," she said. "No, I haven't." And she understood it was courtesy, not evasion. He was giving her the chance to walk away before she knew a thing she couldn't unknow. She could ask and step into his world. Or not, and keep her small safe one. Except the small safe one had just been shown to have a hole in the bottom. 6 weeks ago, she said slowly, working it out aloud. The launch formula's been locked since spring, so whoever took the working notes didn't want what we were selling. The focus came on, the kind she saved for a batch that had turned. They wanted what I know. They wanted to make the next one without me. They're not copying a perfume. They're trying to copy a perfumer. Something shifted in his face. The look of a man who'd brought a tool to a job and found the tool could think. "That's further than I'd gotten," he said quietly. "And I've thought of little else for 4 days. So here's what I came to offer," he went on. "I can find out exactly who took those notes and take back everything he's built on them, down to the foundation. I can put your name on that bottle by the end of the month and make the people who buried you regret it. I'm good at that kind of certainty. It's most of what I do." It was, she'd think later, a genuinely generous offer. He meant every word. And she said no. "No," she said. He went still. Not offended. Interested, the way a man is interested when a door he expected to open pushes back. "If you fix it, then I'm exactly what they already think I am. A woman who couldn't hold her own ground, who needed a powerful man to hold it for her. You'd give me my name back, and the industry would spend the rest of my life whispering I didn't earn it the second time either. That I just found a better protector than a contract. She shook her head. I've spent 11 years being something people handed to other people. I'm not going to become something a man gave back to me. Even you. The silence after that was a different kind. What I'll take is the truth. Find out who took the notes. That I can't do from a basement. But when it comes time to prove who made this, she touched the strip, lightly, the way you touch something sleeping. I'd do that. In a room full of people, where no one can ever say it was your money talking instead of my work. You open the door. I walk through it myself. She held his gaze. Those are the only terms I'm interested in. In 20 years, he said at last, a warmth moving under the calm. Almost no one has said no to me and offered a better idea in the same breath. He extended his hand. Not to seal a rescue, she understood, but a partnership between equals, which was an entirely different thing. Lucan Drago. Most people don't say it out loud. You can. She took it. Margot. Margot Hale. Her grip was steady. And before we go further, I already have an idea who could reach that archive at night without tripping a single alarm. I've had it since the gallery. I've just been hoping, for 4 days, that I was wrong about both of them. The man who'd taken the notes was named Aldrich Venn, and the first thing Margot learned was that he'd already begun to sell her. Lucan laid it out at a townhouse he kept for conversations he didn't want overheard. No guards. A pot of coffee he poured himself. Venn registered a fragrance house in March, he said, sliding a sheet across the table. Maison Aurel. No history, no perfumer of record, a launch the trade press is already calling the comeback of classical perfumery. 3 months ago, he couldn't tell a perfume from a cleaning product. Now he's giving interviews about the architecture of scent. Margot went cold. Some of those phrases were hers, lifted almost word for word from the margins she scrawled to herself in the cave. The architecture of scent. She'd written that at 2 in the morning, the winter her mother died. He's not paraphrasing me, she said. He's reading me aloud, which means he doesn't just have the registered formula. He has the working journal, the physical one, half of it never digitized. She set the sheet down. There are 2 of those in existence. One is in a safe in my apartment. I'd like to check that it's still there. It was not. They drove in silence. The safe was closed, locked, intact, and empty of the one thing that mattered. Margot stood looking at the velvet space where 11 years of her mind used to be, and did not cry, and did not curse, and did the thing she always did instead, went very still, and started to think. No forced entry. They had hours and the right tools, or help from someone who knew the room, and they knew which notebook to take. They didn't grab both. They didn't take the decoy I keep on the shelf in plain sight. They took the real one and left the fake. She turned from the safe. Only 2 people in the world ever knew there were 2 notebooks, Lucan. One taught me to keep a decoy. The other has had a key to my whole life for 9 years. A thief off the street doesn't know to leave the fake. Someone who's been inside my life does. Behind her, he went quiet in a new way. Then let me do the simple thing. Venn owes money in 3 directions. I hold one of them. I can call the note tomorrow, take Maison Aurel apart before it opens, and have your notebook back inside a week. No room full of people. No risk to you. It would cost me an afternoon. And there it was again. The open door, the offered power. She understood he'd keep offering it. Not because he doubted her, because protecting things was simply the shape his caring took. If you call that note, she said, Venn folds, the notebook vanishes into an evidence locker or a fire, and the world hears Maison Aurel collapsed because it crossed Lucan Drago, not because it stole from a perfumer. And I disappear from the story. Again. She didn't raise her voice. She'd learned the people who needed to shout had usually already lost. You keep offering to lift the weight off me. I'm telling you the weight is the only thing that proves I can carry it. He was quiet a long moment. Then he set down the coffee he'd held the entire time, and she realized she'd never seen him do a thing with his hands he hadn't decided to do. All right. Then teach me what I'm looking at. If we're doing this your way, I need to understand the weapon you keep telling me you have. A pause. Show me the mistake. So she did. Not all of it. Not her mother, not the soap, not the winter. Those were hers until the moment they stopped being a secret and became a verdict. But she sat him down with 3 blotters and taught a man who broke nations for a living how to smell. There, she said, an hour in, when his face changed. You feel it? The thing that opens late? It shouldn't be there, he said slowly. It's the wrong note. It contradicts everything above it. And that's exactly why the whole thing holds together. A chemist with my formula reads that note as an error and corrects it, because correcting errors is what makes you good. The moment they correct it, the dry down collapses. Competent on top, dead underneath. She let him sit with it. They can copy what I did. They can't copy why I did it, because the why isn't in the formula. Ven can flood the market, and every bottle will smell almost right and wrong in a way no one can name. And the only person alive who can stand in a room and make it smell right, live, while they all watch, is the woman he assumed was furniture. Lucan looked at the strip a long moment. He bought the recipe, he said quietly. He didn't buy the cook. He bought the recipe, she said. He didn't buy the cook. It was the closest thing to intimacy she'd allowed herself in years, that he'd understood it in his own words, and for 1 second they'd said the same true thing at the same time. Then his phone buzzed, and the second changed. He read it, and the calm sharpened into something colder and turned the screen to her. A press alert, 4 minutes old. Maison Aurel moves launch forward. Exclusive reveal of Master Perfumer Thif S. Friday. And beneath it, a photograph of Aldrich Ven, smiling, his hand on the shoulder of the perfumer he was presenting to the world. An older man. Distinguished. Silver-bearded. A face Margot had loved and trusted and learned everything she knew from, wearing the title stolen from her, looking for all the world like a man who'd made it himself. Margot did not make a sound. She just looked at the photograph of her teacher and felt one of the 2 names she'd been refusing to think arrive whether she wanted it or not. His name is Henry, she said, her voice very even. He taught me everything I know about why a note works, including how to hide one where no one would ever look. A long pause. Which is exactly why this is wrong, Lucan, and why I need to see him before you so much as breathe in his direction. She went to see Henry alone. Lucan didn't like it. If I show up with your people, she told him, it's Lucan Drago confronting a frightened old man, and he tells me nothing. If I show up alone, it's a student visiting her teacher. He owes me a conversation. I'm going to collect it. She picked up her coat. Some doors only open if you knock on them the way you used to. He let her go. That, too, told her something. That for all his power, he'd learned the rarest thing a powerful man can, when his power is the wrong tool. Henry lived where he always had, 3 rooms above a shuttered shop, the windows long unopened. He answered in a cardigan she recognized from a decade ago, his face doing something complicated. Joy and terror at once, cancelling into paralysis. This would not be the confrontation she'd rehearsed. He made tea with shaking hands. She let him. You saw the announcement, he said at last, not looking at her. The whole world saw it, Henry. You're a master perfumer now. It cost her to keep her voice even. You told them about the notebook. You're the only other person alive who knew the working journal existed. That there's a difference between the formula the Maison owns and the real reasoning I never put on any file. You taught me to keep a decoy. You knew there were 2. She set her cup down. Then you stood next to Aldrich Ven and let him call you a genius. So no, we are not going to pretend. Tell me why. And Henry, her teacher, the best nose she'd ever known, put his face in his hands and told her. His nose had been failing for 2 years. Anosmia. The thing that ends a perfumer the way deafness ends a composer, except crueler, because no one believes it, and there's no instrument to point to. He'd hidden it. Without his nose, he was a 70-year-old man with no pension and a reputation that would evaporate the moment the trade learned the truth. And into that terror, 3 months ago, had walked a woman he'd known and trusted for years, with a man named Ven and an offer that knew exactly which fear to press. They said they'd give me one last great work, he whispered, a house with my name on it. She said all I had to do was confirm what they already suspected. That the real liaison noire was never the file, that there was a second notebook where you'd written the reasoning. She already believed it existed. She only needed me to say it was true, and which of the two was real. His voice broke. She made betraying you sound like a gift to us both. And once you confirmed it, they took it. I never touched your safe. I swear it to you. The shame in it was total. I told them which notebook held the reasoning. God help me, I told them it was real. But I couldn't have proven a word of it myself, Margot, because I can't smell it. I haven't been able to smell your dry down, or anyone's, for 2 years. I told them the secret was real on faith, on memory, because I taught you to hide it, and I trusted that you had. And there it was. Margot sat very still and felt the whole shape of the thing rotate in the dark and show her its other side. Because Henri was confessing. Every fact pointed at him. A lesser story would have ended here. The traitor named, the student's heart broken. It was a complete confession. A perfectly good villain. It was the hand. It was not the mind. Henry, you just told me you can't smell the dry down. That you've worked on memory and faith for 2 years. I can't. I haven't. Then you didn't design this. You couldn't have. The whole plan only works if someone was already certain, before they ever held the notebook, that the working journal contained something the formula didn't. You weren't certain. You can't smell the difference anymore. You confirmed a suspicion someone else brought you, fully formed. She leaned in. Which means the person who already knew there was a missing reason worth stealing a notebook for, who knew it was real before you opened your mouth, who knew I kept my reasoning off the file, was the woman standing beside you. You were the hand she needed. The certainty was hers. She built this, not you. The old man stared at her. Say her name, Henry. I already know it. I've known 2 names since the gallery, and you've just told me which of the 2 it was. I only need to hear you say it. And Henry, trembling, said it. Cécile. The woman who'd sat in the cave and drunk her coffee. Who'd told her for 9 years to stay quiet, stay safe, let me handle the people upstairs. The woman she'd trusted to protect her precisely, because she'd never once asked for anything in return. Margot stood. Her hands were steady. Her teacher wept at his own table. A broken instrument used by a more careful hand, and she felt no anger toward him at all. Only a vast, cold understanding settling into place like the bass note of something that would take hours to fully open. You're going to help me, she told him. Not to save yourself. Your nose is gone, and no room full of people will give it back, and we both know it. But there's one thing left that only you and I understand. Before this is over, I'm going to need you to stand in front of everyone and tell the truth about it, including which of us it proves. Out in the old quarter, she called Lucan. It isn't Henry. Henry's the hand. The architect has a key to my whole life and 9 years of practice using it. The wind moved through the narrow street. Don't move against Ven. Don't move against anyone. The person we're actually fighting has spent 9 years counting on everyone underestimating exactly one thing. She closed her eyes. Me. Let's not be the ones who stop. Her name was Cécile Aubray, and Margot had known her for 9 years. She'd believed Cécile was the reason she still had a job. She understood now that she had not had a protector. She'd had a keeper. Lucan turned the pages of 9 years of company filings toward her, one at a time. A slow, patient architecture she'd been living inside without ever seeing the walls. She didn't hide you to save you, he said. She hid you so no one else would ever bid for you. A perfumer with a name can leave, start her own house, demand a share. A perfumer convinced she's an embarrassment, kept in a basement, grateful for it. He tapped the page. That one stays. And when she needed the notebook out of your safe, she didn't have to break in. She's had a key to that building and a reason to be there at night for 9 years. And when you walked into the launch, Margot said, she saw the one thing she'd spent 9 years preventing. Someone noticing you. She didn't sell your reasoning out of greed, Margot. She did it out of panic. If she couldn't own you in secret anymore, she'd cash out everything you were worth before you got away. Scatter it through Ven's house where no one could trace it. Leave you nothing to take with you. He set down the last page. She wasn't stealing a perfume. She was salting the earth. And then it got worse, because that is what a double crisis is for. Cecile moved first. It came on a Tuesday, in a press release timed with a precision Margot had to respect even as it landed. Maison de Valois confirms internal investigation into former staff Perfumer over intellectual property irregularities. Her name wasn't in it. It didn't need to be. By noon, the story had inverted with the smooth horror of a thing engineered to invert. Margot Hale had stolen formulas. Margot Hale had leaked proprietary work to Maison Aurel and was now, in a final act of desperation, attaching herself to a notorious figure to intimidate her former employer into silence. Cecile had turned the true story inside out like a glove. The thief was the victim. The victim was the thief. And here was the cruelest stroke. Rather than destroy the notebook, she had then surrender it to the investigation. Produced it openly, 11 years of Margot's mind in her own hand. Not as proof she was the author, but as proof she was the leak. The one document that could have cleared her had been entered into evidence as the very thing that damned her. She's not just hiding what you did, Lucan said, very still now. She's making the truth itself look like the lie. If you stand up and say I made Liaison Noire, the notebook says you stole it. Your own evidence is the weapon against you. Margot didn't answer. She'd gone very still. The place she went when a batch turned and everyone else panicked. And it was in that stillness, the worst hour she'd known since the winter her mother died, that Lucan did the thing she would never have asked him to do. He told her the truth about himself. I need to tell you why I was at that launch. Because you're about to walk into a fire on your own terms, and you deserve to know who's standing behind you. For the first time since she'd met him, the calm wasn't armor. It was something he held together by hand. 11 years ago I lost someone. She wore a scent, an old soap, discontinued, her grandmother's. I spent a fortune trying to have it remade. Every perfumer got it wrong. Competent. Always dead underneath. He looked up. Then 6 weeks ago, I'm dragged to a launch I have no reason to attend, and I pick up a strip out of habit. 3 hours later, in my car, it opens. His voice was very quiet. It was her. After 11 years, in the dry down of a perfume some girl was taking credit for, I smelled the one thing I'd given up ever smelling again. Margot sat completely still. Then was the excuse. The business that put me in the room. But the reason I stayed was that somewhere in that building was a person who knew how to put a ghost into a bottle. From the first night, I knew what that note meant to me. I didn't yet know how it was built. You taught me that later. But I knew, in the car, that whoever made it had done something no one I'd ever paid could do. He met her eyes. It was you. It was always going to be you. And there was the second edge of the blade. Because Lucan now understood the secret as completely as anyone but Margot ever could. The note, the reason, the memory beneath it. He could walk into the investigation, swear to what that dry down was and why no copy could hold it, stake his terrible name on it, and she'd likely be cleared by lunchtime. He had the power to end it. He'd just confessed he had the understanding to end it, and she watched him not use it. She watched him put his hands flat on the table and wait, because he'd finally understood, completely, that the only way this woman would ever be free was if she was the one holding the match. You could swear to it, she said softly. They'd believe you. They believe you about everything. They would. And that's exactly why it can't be me. If I tell that room what the note is, then it's Lucan Drago's word that saved you, and you spend the rest of your life as a woman a dangerous man vouched for. A pause. I spent 11 years trying to buy that note back from people who could only copy it. You're the only person alive who can make it true. I'm not going to take that from you to feel useful. Something moved in his face. I'd rather watch you do it. For a long moment, she looked at the man who had every reason and every means to save her, and had chosen to stand still and let her save herself. And she felt the quiet rise one final time, and turn, in the rising, into something close to fire. Because Cecile had made one mistake. They always did. By placing the notebook in evidence, she'd told the whole trade that the truth of Liaison Noire lived on paper, that whoever held the document held the work. But a notebook proves only that someone had the formula. It does not prove they understood it. Cecile had built her whole case on the same assumption every one of them had made since the gallery, that the value was in the paper. "Henry can't smell it," Margot said slowly, standing, the plan assembling in the air the way a great composition assembles. Late, all at once, complete. Ven's chemists can copy it and kill it. Cecile couldn't tell the real dry down from a dead one if her life depended on it. Not one person in this war can do the single thing the author can do. She looked at Lucan, and for the first time all day, she smiled. The investigation is public. Cameras, the whole trade, every witness she and Ven care to bring. She wants to put me on trial for stealing my own mind. She picked up her coat. Let's let her. And then let's make her prove, in front of all of them, that she knows what she stole. Margot chose the room herself. That was the first thing that surprised them. As the perfumer under investigation, she had the right to answer the charge in person, and she used it to choose where. She wanted the grand salon with the north light, the studio she'd been exiled from 11 years ago. She wanted the trade press, and the cameras Cecile had been so careful to invite, the ones meant to film a thief's humiliation. She wanted every witness Maison Aurel and Madame Aubray cared to bring. She wanted, in other words, exactly the room her enemy had built. And Cecile, certain she understood Margot completely, mistook it for desperation and gave her all of it. The salon filled. Ven came, expansive and smiling, with 2 chemists. Cecile came in pale grey, composed as a closed door, front row, serene as a woman watching a trap spring on schedule. Henry came, small and grey in a corner, summoned by Margot herself. And at the back, by the windows, stood a silver-haired man with no glass in his hand, asked to do precisely one thing and nothing more. On a long table at the front sat the evidence, the working notebook, surrendered by Maison Aurel to the investigation. The proof, the trade had been told, that this woman had leaked formulas to a competitor. Margot walked to the table and, before anyone could speak, picked the notebook up and handed it to Cecile. "You've read it. You've had it for weeks. Hold on to it. You'll want to follow along." Then she turned to the room. "The Maison says I stole this formula. Madame Aubray says I leaked it to Maison Aurel, who, you'll notice, has just announced a fragrance built on it. I'm not going to argue with the paper. Every word in that notebook is mine, in my hand. But a notebook proves nothing about who wrote it. It proves only who holds it." She nodded at Cecile. "She holds it. So by her own logic, perhaps she wrote it. Perhaps the formula is hers." A murmur. Cecile's expression didn't change, but her fingers settled more firmly on the cover. "Let's find out. Not with paper. Paper can be stolen, copied, held by anyone." She gestured to a second table her 2 young assistants, clean, loyal, never once doubted, had spent the morning preparing. Raw materials, scales, blotters, a small bench. "Let's do it the only way a perfumer's claim has ever truly been tested. Let's make it." She explained it with the plain patience of a teacher, because that was what she was. Maison Aurel has the formula, the registered version and the working notebook both. So Mr. Ven's chemists can make liaison noire. Easily. Let them. And Madame Aubray says it's the Maison's property. She's read every page, so she can guide them. Between the 3 of them, they have the paper, the lab, and the owner. Everything. A pause. Everything except the one thing none of them thought they'd need. She rolled up her sleeves. What followed took 11 minutes, and the room made no sound for any of them. Ven's chemists worked from the notebook, precise and fast, and built the opening exactly. Cool bergamot, the bright lift, flawless. On a strip beside Margot's, their version smelled identical for the first hour of its life, and Cecile's small smile began, at last, to return. But Margot wasn't racing them on the opening. She'd built the opening for them to win. She was building toward the place where the formula, on paper, told a chemist to do something that looked like a mistake. A note that contradicted the structure, that any good chemist would smooth away, because smoothing away contradictions is what makes you good. And she watched, blotter in hand, as Ven's chemists reached that line, and frowned at it, and corrected it, exactly as she'd told Lucan they would, weeks ago, in a quiet room. The notebook recorded what she'd done. It did not, anywhere, record why. The why had never been written down. The why was a soap discontinued before she was born, and a winter, and a phone that didn't ring. "Now we wait," Margot said. 3 hours. A ripple went through the room. The particular restlessness of people who came for a quick execution and have just been told to sit. A journalist near the door checked his watch and half rose. Ven leaned to murmur something in a chemist's ear, and the chemist's face was not reassured. And Cecile. Cecile let her smile widen, just slightly, certain now that the soft woman in the basement had finally overplayed a hand she never had. Margot didn't sit. She let the silence do the work. "I know 3 hours is hard to ask of a room that came for a verdict," she said. "But a perfume doesn't tell the truth about its maker in the first 10 minutes, any more than a person does. It tells you hours later, when the bright part has burned off and everyone's stopped performing." She looked directly at Cecile. "I've always found that's when you learn who someone actually is." The journalist sat back down. Nobody left. 3 hours later, under the north light, Margot walked the room with 2 strips and let them smell for themselves, hers and Maison Aurel's, made from her own notebook by competent hands. The opening had been identical. The dry down was not even close. Ven's version had gone flat and slightly sweet. Correct, lifeless, a beautiful sentence with the meaning sanded off. Margot's had opened the way it had opened for a stranger in a car 4 days after a launch. Deepened, warmed, turned into the thing that had made 200 people go quiet without knowing why. "They had everything I wrote," Margot said, to the whole room now. "And they made it correctly. And it died, because the living part was never on the paper. It was never for sale, which means it was never stolen, which means I never leaked it. You cannot leak a thing that exists only inside the person who made it." She set the 2 strips side by side where the cameras could see. "You can own my notebook. You're holding it. You cannot own the reason. It might have ended there." But she'd promised herself it would end honestly. She turned to the small grey man in the corner. "Henry, tell them what you smell." And Henry, her teacher, the finest nose of his generation, stood and took the 2 strips in trembling hands. He brought them to his face, one after the other. And the room watched the best perfumer most of them had ever heard of close his eyes and try, with everything he had left, to tell the living from the dead. "I'm sorry," he said at last, and his voice broke, and it was the truest thing said in that room all day. "I can't tell them apart. I haven't been able to smell anything for 2 years." He looked at Ven, who'd gone the color of paper. They knew. When they made me the master perfumer of his house, they knew I couldn't smell, because the house was never about a perfumer. It was about owning her. He turned and pointed one shaking hand not at Margot but at the woman in grey. She knew the reason was real before anyone opened the notebook. I only confirmed it. She built it. Every face in the salon turned to Cecile Aubray. She held the notebook in her lap. 11 years of a mind she'd kept in a basement and called it kindness. And for the first time in 9 years, Margot watched her reach for the words that had always come so easily. "Let me handle this. Keep your head down. Trust me." And find there were none left that this room would believe. Cecile had built a trial to prove Margot didn't matter without her. She had simply, finally, given Margot a room. At the back, the silver-haired man who'd been asked to do one thing stepped forward and did it. Not violence. Not a threat. He spoke once, into the silence, in a voice the whole trade had learned to go quiet for the record. And I'll put my name to it. I've spent 11 years and a great deal of money searching for the person who could make that dry down. Every house in Europe failed. Every chemist failed. He looked, not at the cameras, but at Margot. There is exactly one person alive who can do what you all just watched her do. You've been calling her a thief. Her name is Margot Hale, and it's long past time this room learned to say it. The Maison de Valois offered Margot everything, of course. Within the week, once the trade press had finished turning. The title, Master Perfumer, in writing this time. The studio with the north light. A share of the house. They offered, in the careful language of people who've just realized the size of their mistake, to make things right. She took the meeting in the cave and watched the executives flinch coming down the stairs into the windowless room they'd kept her in for 11 years. She let them flinch. Then she said no. Not angrily. She had no anger left for them. They weren't, in the end, important enough to be angry at. "You didn't bury me because you misjudged my work," she said. "You buried me because you decided what a perfumer was allowed to look like, and I wasn't it. The work was never the problem. The work won you awards from a basement." She slid the contract folder back across the bench. "You're not offering my name back because you finally see me. You're offering it because a man with a frightening reputation said it out loud, and now it's expensive to keep pretending you don't. That's not recognition. That's a refund," she stood. "I'm not for sale a second time. Even back to myself." She left that afternoon and did not return. What she built instead, she built small and on purpose. 3 rooms, but with windows, the light coming from the east to catch the morning work. Her 2 assistants came with her, and she put their names on the door beside hers, the same size, because she'd learned exactly what it cost to be left off a door. She took nothing from the mason but the one thing they could never have kept from her anyway, the contents of her own head. The notebook she burned. Not in grief, not for drama. On the first morning in the new studio, in a clean steel bowl by the eastern window, she watched 11 years of her own handwriting curl into ash with something that felt, unexpectedly, like relief. Because she understood now what the whole war had been about. They'd all believed the value was in the paper. Venn, Cécile, the Maison, every chemist who'd tried to copy her. They'd fought and stolen and lied over a book. And the book had never been the thing. The thing had always been inside her, where no safe could hold it, and no contract could sign it away, and no one, ever again, could take it out of a drawer in the dark and put a prettier face on it. Let them have the ash. She'd keep the reason. Henry she did not abandon. This surprised the people who knew the story, and would have surprised Cécile most of all, who'd built her whole understanding of Margot around the belief that the soft woman in the basement was either a victim or, given the chance, an avenger. Margot turned out to be neither. She offered him work. Not as a nose. That was gone, and pretending otherwise would have been a cruelty. As a teacher. There were 40 years of why behind the what in that man's head, things that had never made it onto paper, and she had a studio now and a door with room on it for more names. "You taught me to hide a note where no one would look," she told him, the day he came to see the place. "Come teach them, properly this time." In the light, he wept. He came. And Lucan, she made wait. Not as a game. She simply would not walk out of one arrangement where a powerful person held the shape of her life and straight into another, however gentle, however much she'd begun. She could admit it now, to want it. So for a while she let it be only what it had been in the quiet rooms. 2 people who could say a true thing at the same time and recognize each other across it. He didn't push. That, more than anything, was how she knew. A man accustomed to taking what he wanted, who had learned, for exactly one person, the discipline of waiting to be chosen. He came to the studio in its first month, on an ordinary evening, the eastern light gone gold, and she handed him a strip without a word. He smelled it. 3 hours of his life she'd built into the way it deepened, and went very still, the way he'd gone still in his car a lifetime ago, because he knew the structure of it, the late opening door, the signature no one could buy. But it wasn't the ghost he'd chased for 11 years. It was new, built on the same hidden architecture, the same refusal to put the living part on paper, but warmer, forward-looking. A composition about a beginning instead of a loss. "It's not her," he said quietly. "No, it's not. I can make the old one for you whenever you want her." "I'd be honored to." She held his gaze, an equal offering an equal, a thing of equal weight. "But I didn't make you wait this long to give you back a ghost. I made you wait so that when I gave you something, it would be something I made on purpose. For you. As me." A pause, and the smallest smile. "Those were never going to be anyone's terms but mine." He looked at the strip, then at her. "I know. It's most of why I waited." He didn't reach for her. She reached for him. That detail mattered, and they both knew exactly why. Outside, the city went on misjudging soft-spoken women in basements, as it always had, as it always would. Inside, in the eastern light, Two people stood over a bench that smelled of jasmine and morning and something underneath that no chemist would ever name. And for the first time in 11 years, the person who'd made it was the one being credited. In a room she owned, on terms that were finally, completely her own. She'd been told to sit in the back. She'd built her own room instead. So here's what I keep coming back to with Margot's story. Everyone in that salon believed the same thing, that whoever held the notebook held the genius. The Maison believed it. Venn paid a fortune for it. Cecile spent 9 years building a cage around it, and every one of them was wrong about the same thing. They thought the masterpiece was the paper. They never understood that the masterpiece was the person. And a person can't be stolen. Only underestimated. Here's my question for you. The puzzle won first. Margot hid one deliberate wrong note in the heart of the fragrance. A note that read as a mistake on paper, that any chemist would correct, but that bloomed in the dry down into the one thing no one could copy. What do you think that note was? What was the smell she buried at the center of it all? Tell me your guess in the comments. I read them, and the ones who get close always understand the story on a level the others miss. And then the real one. The one I actually want to know. Have you ever made something? Really made it, with your own hands and your own mind, late at night, when no one was watching? And then stood in a bright room and watched someone prettier, or louder, or more aspirational be handed the credit for it? Did you stay quiet, the way Margot stayed quiet, for years, because staying quiet felt like the only way to keep what little you had? I'd genuinely love to hear it. Not the polished version, the real one. Because I think there are more of us in that basement than anyone upstairs would ever guess. And sometimes the first time you hear your own story out loud is when a stranger tells it back to you in the comments. If Margot's story reached something in you, if you've ever been the person in the back of the room who actually made the thing, subscribe and stay with me. There's another one coming. And she's just as quiet and just as impossible to keep buried. I'll see you in the next one.